Welcome to talkSPORT USA, talkSPORT's dedicated NFL YouTube channel with myself, Will Varney. Big game coming up tomorrow at Wembley Stadium. The finale of London's 2025 International Series, the LA Rams taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Pleasure to say, to give us a bit more insight into the LA Rams coming over here to London, ESPN's Sarah Barshop, Rams reporter. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to London. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. I'm just very excited always when the schedule comes out and I find out the team I cover is out here.
Look, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Before we get into the football side of things, I sort of wanted to start with logistics, which is maybe a weird thing to start with, but I think it's quite interesting. The fact that the Rams have come out this morning, Saturday morning, it's the latest we've ever seen it for an international game, whether that be in London or anywhere else. The Rams have obviously stayed on the East Coast and then have come over here. What did you make of that decision and what's been made of it in America and also with what you're hearing?
I think a lot of people, like you talk about externally, a lot of people are surprised. And I think what the Rams decided was they already, when they play on the East Coast, you talk about going West Coast to East Coast, that flight is not that much shorter than what they did from Baltimore here. And the time zone, getting used to that time change, it's not so drastic. Then when they have a 10 o'clock kickoff on the East Coast. So they kind of look at it as they got a full week of practice in Baltimore. They practice Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I think some teams who come over say that Friday practice is a little bit harder after you get off the plane. So they feel like we get 3 good practices, and I think they're going to spend 36 hours here in London. And while I talked to some players and they said, it's a bummer, they also called it a business trip and said they will be ready for that 2:30 kickoff, but I think the idea is that their bodies won't have the time to adapt. And I think it would have been hard, obviously, to go from the West Coast to London for such a short time. But because they got that time adjusting to Eastern time in Baltimore, I think they're hoping that gets them off to a fast start on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think, like you said there, we've seen the Jaguars come out in recent years and they come out and have a full week of practice. We saw it with the Bears and we've seen it recently with the Jets as well, that they give themselves that time. I suppose for the Rams, it's not just London. You've got Australia to come in 2026, right? I know it's very early, but do you think they would stick to that same plan for Australia, despite the stark time difference that is and the intensity of the travel as well? Do you think they would do the same thing here? I
don't think so. I think that's hard. Like, you're talking about a much, like you said, more drastic time change and going the other way. I think I've heard that they won't do like a training camp or anything out there, but I think they will have to go there. I don't know how early, but early enough that you can let your body truly get ready. Because also the talk about, like right here, they have a bye week next week. Yeah. After Australia, I believe it's going to be early in the season. That's what it sounds like. And if that's the case, my guess is that you don't have a bye week that early. It doesn't work like that. So it'll be interesting to see how the NFL does handle that and how the Rams choose to handle that logistics, but I think it'll be a lot different than how they've handled this week.
Okay, logistics done. Let's get into some football chat. 4-2 to start the season, the Rams. They're third in the NFC West, but look, they match the records of the Seahawks and the 49ers. The 49ers divisional record is what has them top. What's your overall assessment so far through the first 6 weeks of the season with what you've seen from LA?
I think that when I looked at the schedule that came out, because 2 years ago, right, they started 1-4 last year, 3-6 the year before, and they've gone on these runs, these deep runs, and they've made the playoffs the last 2 seasons. Well, the schedule came out this year, and they're playing a first-place schedule because they won the division, and I think that is challenging. And I think not that they didn't want to get off to a fast start the last 2 years, but I think they understood maybe there's a little more urgency. Can't start 1-4 and expect to kind of go on that run at the end of the season. And so it was interesting when the schedule came out. I don't know that I thought 4-2, but it kind of was like, are they going to take advantage of this tough games in Philly? Who knew the Colts were going to be as good as they are? I've seen a competitive Rams team, but I've also seen an incomplete Rams team. Yes, they beat the Ravens, obviously, without Lamar Jackson, 17-3. I think there were a lot of people who felt like they could have played a lot better on Sunday. And so it'll be interesting to see how they come out. But yeah, this is a team, I think they've got to put it together at the 3 phases, right? Like the special teams is the big concern right now. Had block kicks, that's cost them games. They've had 2 losses that, that's the difference in the game. Now, of course, they've also had, always look at the other way, right? Like that Colts game could have been a loss.
Yes.
So, but I think they'll take where they are right now, but feel like they have a lot they can improve on. And, they obviously believe that they are a playoff team and that It'll be interesting to see those division matchups. Like you said, they've only played one division game. It'll be interesting to see how they fare again against San Francisco and then against Seattle.
You mentioned the special teams issues that we've seen. We've also seen real problems in the red zone. And there's red zone efficiency, and I know that you bring in Davante Adams to almost try and fix that, but we haven't seen that come to fruition yet through these first 6 weeks. Do you think that's a long-term concern with the red zone issues? I read that Davante Adams said he'd spoken with Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay at length. They're trying to work through it. Is it a long-term concern, or is this something that can just be rectified as we go on deeper into the season?
I don't think it's long-term, but, Davante Adams talked about it, and he said, I played with Aaron Rodgers for a long time. We built that chemistry. If you remember, Matthew Stafford missed most of training camp because he was dealing with a back injury. I think that's where some of the reps they missed is showing up. A couple times I asked Stafford about it, and he said, those are 2 throws I wish I had back. I could have put them in a better spot. So each of them have kind of owned up to, we're not quite there. We're a little off. But I think as the season goes on, especially we can talk about Puka Nacua ruled out for the game, and I think he's going to have more targets, Davante Adams, and I think they're not going to force feed anything, but I do think the more reps they get and the more live throws they're getting in a game, the more chemistry they'll find and the better he'll be.
You mentioned Matthew Stafford there, 37 years old, and what he continues to do is just impress week in, week out. Maybe I keep saying it for the wrong I keep saying Super Bowl or bust with this team. And maybe that's right or wrong, but it feels like they've got so many pieces where they're ready to make a real run. Just on Matthew Stafford, Liam Cohen said this week, don't even try and read Stafford's eyes. There's no point. I asked that to Jordan Lewis, the Jags corner, whether he was going to try yesterday. It was emphatic, no. He's a generational talent. Yeah. When you see Matthew day in, day out, and when you watch him, how impressive has he been through the start of the season?
Yeah, I think I'll think about the first couple of training camp practices I watched him throw a no-look pass, and I just remember being like, oh wow, that's, and I've covered Aaron Rodgers, I've seen it, but seeing it up close at training camp was like, okay, I see why guys are fooled on the field. He's very talented, and last year the offense had a lot of inconsistency, but you could see what he does to defenses just mentally, how well he can read defenses, puts a lot of pressure on that defensive coordinator and the defense, and it's interesting to see. You can tell Sean McVay just really appreciates Matthew Stafford and kind of understands that not everyone can do this. I think you hear Davante Adams talk about it too. When he was like, obviously I've watched him afar. They played against each other many times in the NFC North, but he said, being his teammate and being on the field, you kind of really get to appreciate how good he is, especially talk about fourth quarter comebacks late in games. He said there's no one you'd rather be in a huddle with than Matthew Stafford.
And look, there's a lot of questions about, I mentioned his age, 37 years old, and we'll get on to a bit in a moment just how aggressive they could be before the trade deadline, but looking maybe towards the future, it feels like with his age that we're sort of heading into these twilight years, this last dance. They obviously have 2 first-round picks next year. It feels like that's when they're probably going to find his heir apparent. Is that the sense that you're getting ahead of next year, that maybe he's got 1 or 2 final seasons and then he's going to call it a day?
I think, who knows? This could be the last season. I don't think he knows. And I think that's what the Rams appreciate. They have the relationship he and McVay have, that they're not going to force him to make that decision right now. I think they know how important it is for him to get to the end of the season, see how he feels, and see if he wants to do this again. I don't know that they'll draft a quarterback with those first 2 picks. They might. I don't think they're going to rule that out, certainly. Yeah. And you look at how they build this team, it makes sense with the contracts you're going to have to pay Jared Verse in a couple years, Kobe Turner, Puka Nacua, that you want a rookie on a rookie deal. But I also watched them trade for Matthew Stafford, so you never know what they're going to do.
The Les Snead mantra at F them picks. We've seen it day in, day out. You mentioned the head coach, Sean McVay, and I find him such a fascinating character. I love listening to him talk because he's just, how he comes across as somebody who is just so genuine. He's spoken very openly about issues that he's had that time where he was considering retiring. Firstly on Sean as a man, Liam Cohen said yesterday what inspired him most as a head coach was how Sean McVay would talk to people around the building. He'd make everybody feel valued. Tell me a little bit about Coach in your dealings with him, how he comes across, especially to you guys as reporters, but his players as well.
Yeah, I think I always, when people ask me that, I kind of say he understands our jobs, right? Does he like answering injury questions? No. Does he maybe want to go in details about a play that didn't work? No. But he answers our questions because he knows that we are also just doing our jobs. And you hear that from players too, that they believe that he is in their corner, that he respects them and respects the job they are trying to do. So, people talk about Devontae Adams, I think actually is the best example. He got to LA and he said he asked around, other people about Sean, and he said every single person had good things to say about him. And he said, I don't know that I've ever had that in football, right? That every single person you talk to says, yes, that's a guy I'd want to play for, or that I enjoyed playing for. And so to me, when he said that kind of spoke volumes to who Sean is.
I mentioned there the personal issues that he'd spoken about previously, that thought process of maybe retiring back in 2022. Do you get the sense that he's hungrier than ever now coaching? Because I get that sense when you hear him in press conferences, when you see him out on the field and how passionate he is with his players. Is that what you sense as well?
Yeah, he's talked about the perspective that time gave him, and how much he I think he took a step back and realized how much he enjoys doing this, how much he wants to be in the locker room, in those meeting rooms, and how this is what he's passionate about. And so, yes, I noticed the difference from the 2022 season, which was hard for a lot of people. But specifically, he's talked so openly about it. And I think once he decided this is where I want to be, you could tell it seemed like a little bit of relief from him to have made that decision. And I mean, I've had people ask me, like, do you think he's going to retire? No, I think he made his decision, and it will be a long time before he steps away from coaching football.
And the Rams are lucky to have him. They're also lucky, I think, to have Chris Schuler as their defensive coordinator. I have to touch on this defense because last year, what it did to the Minnesota Vikings in the playoffs really, I think, put everyone on notice, regardless of what happened in the regular season. So then looking at this season, when you have somebody like Jared Verse, who's so feared, but for me, Byron Young has been phenomenal through these opening 6 weeks. 7.5 sacks, he's second in the league, but he's still playing on his rookie deal. Just talk to me about some of the players on this defense who are really stepping up at a big moment right now for LA.
Yeah, it's a very young defense, and I think Les Snead get a lot of credit for how he's built this defense. I mean, Aaron Donald retires, and not that any one player or a group of players is even going to replace Aaron Donald, but I think it's very impressive how he's built this group, this young pass rush, that played as well as they did at the end of the season, and I think we saw the growth last year. And now, I mean, talk about Byron Young. I talked to Joe Caniglio, his coach, in the spring, and was asking about him, and he was saying how good of a, OTAs he had and how he thought he was going to have a role in this defense. Now, I don't know that he could have predicted this start, but I know that they feel very good about their pass rush, and you specifically talk about Verse and Byron Young. I think those are two that I'm sure many offenses, do not like to see coming. And Verse talked about how they play off of each other and how disrupt if one is taking the double team and the other one's one-on-one. He's like, they both feel like, well, he's holding this down for me. I better go win this one-on-one and get to the quarterback.
Look, I mentioned there Chris Schuler, and I think it's really interesting looking maybe towards the next head coaching cycle, because earlier in the season I was in Sao Paulo. I spoke with Daniel Popper for The Athletic, and he was talking about Jesse Minter, and maybe Jesse Minter had been overlooked. Chris Schuler, it feels like right now, I know they only gave up 3 points. It's 3 points last week to a Ravens team that is without Lamar Jackson, but still I feel like what they're building on this defense is going to get him noticed. Do you get that sense that come the next offseason, he's probably going to have some head coaching interviews?
I think so, and I think it's, to me, what would be impressive is the growth from year one to year two as a defensive coordinator. It's not an easy jump after teams have seen your defense either throughout the season or after an off season, and so the start they've gotten off to, I think, look, everyone jokes about you have a cup of coffee with Sean McVay and you might get a head coaching interview. But yes, I think Chris Schuler's name, I've heard it mentioned. And I think if the defense keeps up the way they've played this year, there's no doubt that people will be interested in talking to him about a head coaching opportunity.
Final couple of questions from me, Sarah. Really, really appreciate your time. I previously mentioned it, the sort of Les Snead mantra about picks and how they can be aggressive, the Rams. We're heading towards the trade deadline, the start of November. Is this a team that you think could be active before the deadline? And if they were, where do you sense a positional need that they might look to strengthen?
Yeah, I think it'll come down to who is available. I don't think they are going to trade for a player just hey, we want to add. But you look back into that 21 season, like they believed that Von Miller was the addition that would put them over the top. I could be wrong. I think they started 7-1 that year. And so I think they believe like he could get us to a Super Bowl. And so if there is a player like that, absolutely. I think they are not scared. Now, I don't think they want to – I think they'd love to keep those 2 first-round picks, especially as you talk about a possible quarterback. And they've drafted so well the last couple of years. I don't think it's an F them picks mantra, but I don't think they will be scared to. And I could see – look, their secondary, Akella Witherspoon, has been out with a broken clavicle. It's not a short-term injury. I think there are positions they can add, but I mean, they are very happy with this team, but if there was an area they could add, I would think that the secondary, specifically at cornerback, is a way they could go.
Let's look ahead to tomorrow then. Big game, and I think the London crowd are really looking forward to this one. We've had a couple of good games, interesting games, especially last week, but I think what people are hoping for is a real shootout tomorrow, hopefully, between Liam Cohen and Sean McVay's teams. Going into this, though, you mentioned it right at the very start. No Puka Nacua. How big a loss is that? Because it feels like Stafford and Puka have this relationship built in. So all of a sudden you take him out. Is it Tutu Atwell? Is it Jordan Whittington? How big a challenge is that going to be for the Rams without him tomorrow?
Yeah, a big challenge. And it's not just because of, I mean, before he got hurt, he was leading the league in catches and receiving yards. It's not just because of that. You watch what he does in the run game, the run blocking he does. He's a big part of this offense, and that's why he's in all the time. Yeah. Why it's kind of the Cooper Kupp model, right? That's why he's been able to have that much success. So they will miss him a lot. I am interested to see, do they lean more 12 personnel with him out, or is it Tutu Atwell, Jordan Whittington, and a big game from Davante Adams? I'll be really interested to see kind of what the game plan is there. Interesting to me that they ruled him out so early. Sometimes, teams will say, I don't want the other team to know, but it looked like a pretty bad ankle sprain when it happened. He went down on the field. So also interested to see what they do, but I could see Tutu Atwell having a big game on Sunday.
And we've seen those struggles as well when Puka's come out of the games, not just last week, but I think it was against the Texans in week 1 as well, where the offense starts to stall really in his absence. Obviously without Rob Havenstein as well at right tackle, so again, the line sort of reshuffles. But for me tomorrow, what's the key thing that you're going to be looking out for? It could be a particular matchup. It could be, like you say, could it be a big game from Davante Adams? What are you going to be keeping a keen eye on at Wembley tomorrow, Sarah?
I think it's the need for a fast start. I think they, after last week, had averaged 9.8 points in the first half of games. That's not enough to consistently, make a playoff run, I don't think. Yes, this is a very good defense, but I think they know they need to. They say it's executing. You say, like, what do you need to get a fast start? Well, we just need to execute better. It will be harder, no doubt, without Puka Nacua, but interested to see Davante Adams, but I think just can they get points on the board early and maybe put some pressure on that Jaguars defense.
So then finally, ambitions-wise, the ceiling of this team, obviously it's a team that wants to have a deep run in the playoffs. What do you see for this team moving forward right now if you were to sort of categorize them? Is this a team that could go deep in January and potentially get to the big game in San Francisco come February?
I do think so. I don't think they are there. I think this team right now is not quite there. I think we've seen the kind of, like we talked about, the inconsistencies, especially on special teams. But if there's anything I've learned from the last 2 seasons watching Sean McVay coach teams, is that they will figure out, they will put it together, and they are not scared to try whatever they need to do. Because you look at that team last year that lost in Philadelphia, I thought they were going to go win a Super Bowl.
I think most people did. Yeah.
So I think got some time to get there, but yes, I think this is a team that will be competing for that Super Bowl.
Well, Sarah, really, really appreciate your time. Can't wait to see how it all plays out at Wembley tomorrow between the Rams and the Jags. Thank you so much. All the best for the rest of the season as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.